Welcome to City of Churches, where we take you on an in-depth tour of different churches in Brooklyn and in Queens. Now, each church is different and unique, not just in architecture, not just in design, but in the way they reflect the neighborhoods that surround them. And today, we're in this neighborhood. We're in Woodside, Queens. I'm Nick Vavis, and I'm taking you on a tour of St. Sebastian's Church. St. Sebastian's is a beautiful church and quite remarkable inside. And interesting thing about St. Sebastian's is that it served its community an entirely different purpose. Woodside had always been predominantly Irish and famous for its Irish pubs and its restaurants, but in recent years an increasing population of Asians and Hispanics moved in, and it really added a nice international flair to the neighborhood. So if you're ever in the mood for some good Colombian or Filipino food, you gotta come to Woodside. Now, the first European settlers arrived in the 1640s. They established one of the earliest Dutch outposts in Queens County, despite being surrounded by forests that were home to dangerous wolves, snakes, and other wildlife. In the late 1860s, a residential building boom began here in Woodside, and a new village was formed. It was named after a local newspaper column called Letters from Woodside, written by local resident John Kelly, whose home was actually right here where the parish school now stands. The village firehouse was called Fireman's Hall and was built in 1884. And in an upstairs meeting room, the first parish of St. Sebastian's was established. It was actually a small wood frame building that they built, and it was located right here, which is now the parking lot of the parish school. Now, I know a lot of the buildings are rich in St. Sebastian's history, the rectory and the parish center and the parish school, but something else I wanted to point out, which is very interesting, was this war memorial that was erected, and it was dedicated to the local young men who lost their lives for us in the Vietnam War. And there's another plaque, it's on the side of the building, and that was dedicated to local young parishioners who lost their lives during World War I between 1914 and 1918. Now, I've just arrived at Doughboy Park. It's a pretty residential area, and behind me is the more industrial area of Woodside, and straight ahead along Roosevelt Avenue, that's the commercial area with the shops and the restaurants. Now, something I want to show you in the park. It's a statue that was dedicated in 1923, and it's called the Returned Soldier. It's a memorial to local young men who lost their lives during World War I. It was actually blessed by local clergymen, including a priest from St. Sebastian's. Now, in 1928, the statue of the Returned Soldier was declared the best war memorial of its kind in the United States by the National Federation of the Arts. And if you take a look at the statue, you can see he's actually leaning against his weapon. He's got the head bandage on, which is actually indicative of a returned soldier, as opposed to some statues where they're holding the gun and they're in battle. And another monument or another plaque that commemorates this one in particular, September 11th, and this one reads, on September 11, 2001, the following who lived or worked in Woodside died in the World Trade Center attack. Their lives touched our hearts. Their sacrifice changed us forever. We remember them with love and honor. After the Queensboro Bridge was completed, Woodside became a transportation hub where multiple railway lines converged, connecting Queens with Manhattan. So in addition to the Long Island Railroad, there were also 2 trolley lines, and then later came the elevated subway line, which is where the 7 train runs along. This caused a tremendous growth in population and construction of additional housing for more than 6,000 residents in the small neighborhood. A new building that housed both a church and a school was completed in 1926. That same year, the Lowe's movie theater chain opened a new 2,000-seat movie palace across the street from the school. The first film shown there starred Buster Keaton and some of America's most popular silent screen comedians. By the 1950s, the Lowe's theater chain was forced to close several movie houses, and at the time, St. Sebastian's Parish had once again outgrown their church and was looking for a new house of worship. They purchased the Shutter movie theater and replaced the entrance lobby and the box office with a beautiful Romanesque bell tower and a vestibule. High above the new entrance is the statue of St. Sebastian that's almost even with the elevated subway tracks and can be easily viewed from a train window. The newer brickwork closely matches the original 1926 color. Now, as for the movie theater's auditorium, that's a totally different story. I'm going to go inside and have Monsignor Hardiman tell us all about it. Monsignor.
Hey, Nick.
How are you?
Very well. How are you?
It's good
Welcome
to see you.
Welcome to St. Sebastian.
Thank you so much. Listen,
Please,
I have a lot of questions. You and I had spoken a little bit about the history of this church, and I know this church in particular has a lot of very special artifacts, a lot of unique history about it. And I think my first question is the origin of the church, the building itself.
Okay, well, St. Sebastian has a long history. The parish this June will be 116 years old. Originally, it was founded in 1894, and 2 years after its founding, the pastor, together with the people, was able to raise money to build a small wooden church, which was located across the street, actually across 3 streets, 3 major thoroughfares, Woodside Avenue, Roosevelt Avenue, and 58th Street. And that small church was sufficient for the original parish, which was about 350 families. But 6 years later, they had really run out of room in the small church, and they began to look for additional space. Well, in the early 1920s, they built St. Sebastian School, and the school auditorium, together with the small church, and the rectory is located over there, and the convent is located over there. It's a stiff walk every Sunday morning.
Well, I saw a parish center when I walked that way.
The parish center is something that was built in the late 60s, and what's unique about the parish center is we have an Olympic-sized swimming pool, and we might be the only parish in New York State. We might be one of the few parishes in the U.S. to have a swimming pool.
Yeah, I've never heard of that before. I should have brought my bathing suit.
That's right.
We could have taken advantage of the pool. I've never heard of that.
But the school served as the church until 1950s. And in 1950, there was a Supreme Court decision that forced Loewy's movie theater to divest itself of movie theaters if it was going to continue to produce movies. And the pastor of the parish at the time, Father Moran, said he saw a golden opportunity to look at this building, which had been Loewy's Woodside movie theater up until 1953 or so, and he bought it. He bought a couple of other stores next door, and he transformed it into St. Sebastian Church. This building that we're in right now was originally built in 1926.
So was it a movie theater at that point?
And it was a movie theater from 1926 until 1950.
1950 when it was transformed into
the church. The cornerstone was laid in 1955. So what's unique about the building, if you look around, there are no stained glass windows. Almost any other church you'd walk into, you'd say, look, magnificent stained glass windows. Other thing that's unique about our building is it's a sloping floor because it was a movie theater. And it means that visually, the parishioners, no matter where they're seated, have a great view of the altar.
It's like an auditorium.
Exactly. There are no columns. There's nothing to block your vision or anything else, and nothing to distract you either. A sloping floor also means...
What does that do to the basement?
It means that you can't use the basement for anything.
Storage.
Yeah, mechanicals and stuff.
So on the wall I see, are those original columns from the movie theater itself?
Oh yes,
you know?
They are original, but this whole space was redesigned and repainted in 1994. My predecessor, Monsignor Finity, had a wonderful fundraising campaign, and the people came through, and he hired an artist named Felix Chavez, who designed the color scheme, and those, of course, that's all faux marble. It's not real marble.
So when it was a movie theater, where was the projection booth?
Oh.
I understand it's behind us.
Yes, absolutely. The choir loft, that's what we use now as a choir loft. That was the projection booth.
How's the reverberation from the choir loft being there? How does that sound throughout the church?
Oh
Acoustics,
yeah,
so to speak?
the acoustics in the building are wonderful. But it makes it difficult for somebody to sing because the organ is being played there and there's a 2.5 second delay. So if there's somebody singing up a leading song, they have to learn how to be accompanied by an organist who's playing up in the loft.
And the ceiling, yes, itself, I was going to take
The ceiling itself
is so ornate. It's beautiful.
And Felix Chavez, as I said, was the artist who kind of came up with the color scheme and everything else. And Monsignor Finity's direction was what allowed this to blossom because it had been just a dark ceiling.
Silly question, but how do they change the light bulbs?
Well, there's a catwalk above so that there's the roof and there's the ceiling and there's space between it. But this center chandelier actually lowers so that we're able to lower that.
When I came in or came towards the church, there was something very unique. There was a bell.
Yes.
And I've heard some stories about the bell, that it's a very unique item, and I wanted to see if you could tell me the history of the bell.
Well, the bell originally was a steamship bell, which eventually came to Woodside as a firehouse bell. And when the church was built, it was the first bell for the church. When the wooden church was demolished, and there was no place to install a bell here, so they installed the bell outside of the rectory, and there it has been ever since.
It's in good shape.
It's in very good shape, and it's great to watch the children because the children are always looking for the clapper. The clapper is not there.
So it's a silent bell.
It's a silent bell.
Okay. So, Monsignor, I think it's time, if we could, to take a tour down to the altar.
Sure,
Would that be okay?
absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, and drag it down the sloping floor.
The sloping floor that's
100
112 feet long.
How long have you been here at St. Sebastian's?
I've been here for 8 years.
8 years.
And I hope to be here for many, many more years. So
I'll
put in a good word.
I will.
Please. Here we are.
Wow. It is very ornate.
It really is, isn't it?
There's a lot of marble.
It's all faux marble, though.
Is it really?
Yeah, including the altar. For about 6 months, I thought it was a marble altar. And then I'm looking, I'm saying, how do you get a marble altar to sit on top of a rug? And I went up and I tapped it one day, and it's wooden, but the artistry in being able to do something like that is incredible.
It looks so real.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. And then the baldacchino itself.
The baldacchino is unique because in a church, usually you have a statue or an image of the saint that the parish is named after.
Yes.
Well, the baldacchino is the only place where an image of Saint Sebastian is. And right up at the very top of the baldacchino, you can see his face surrounded by arrows. And of course, Sebastian was shot to death with arrows and then clubbed to death for good measure.
Why is the church named after St. Sebastian?
I'm not really sure. However, I can tell you that Calvary Cemetery, which is only a few blocks from here, the first part of Calvary that you come to is the cemetery of St. Sebastian. Okay. And of course, Sebastian was a Roman martyr and has catacombs in Rome and so
that
forth.
Could be the significance of doing that. Who did the paintings?
This is, again, Felix Chavez, the artist. When it was the original church in the 50s, that was all black, and the Annunciation and the Visitation were there, but they were there in gold outline. Subsequently, Chavez was able to keep the Annunciation and the Visitation and turn them into these two absolutely beautiful murals.
But this was the movie screen, essentially.
Essentially, yes, absolutely, yeah.
Tell me about the Stations of the Cross.
Sure.
Why are these unique?
The Stations of the Cross are magnificent. When Chavez repainted them, he really brought out the colors. And every year during the Lenten season, we have the Stations of the Cross prayed here in the church, and it's just wonderful. The people love to look at these stations. As we're passing, you notice the 3 sanctuary lamps. One of them recently fell. Oh. And thank God nobody was hurt. Mass. No, it wasn't during Mass, and nobody was hurt, thank God. Over here we have 2 statues. One is the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and the other is the Divino Niño. Sunday morning after the 12 o'clock Mass, and the 12 is our most populous Mass. We have almost 2,000 people at the 12.
Wow.
And at least 600 or 700 of them will line up here after Mass to come and see the statue of the Divino Niño.
Why, I noticed a lot of the paint has been worn off.
Sure.
Why is that?
You can see that people have been touching the child Jesus' feet and the globe underneath him. Sometimes, if you really look close, you can see that there's other pieces of paint that's been missing from it as well.
And then do they refurbish or repaint this? They
we'll,
have to.
We'll do it every once in a while. Yeah.
The detail's amazing.
It really
is. It
is.
is amazing. I mean, the artistry is really, really incredible.
Yeah, and it's a depiction of the child Jesus, not the infant Jesus and not the boy Jesus, but it's a child Jesus.
Yeah, I was going to say, you don't hear of that much. It's either the infant Jesus or the grown man
Actually,
Jesus.
I guess in
like
South America,
unique.
Central America, it's part of the Spanish tradition because that's where it must have come from in the Philippines as well.
Okay.
So it's watching the child Jesus grow up. You know, we have many unique things. This statue and the other statues, it's unique, but one of the greatest things we have is a chapel.
Well, there's something that you mentioned earlier that's very unique about the chapel that's in the chapel.
Very unique.
So aside from, or including the bell, which is a great connection to the past, there's something else that was really amazing to me, a connection to the past.
And it was amazing to me too,
and
because it only just
me,
happened.
Yeah,
so.
I jumped at that. I'd really like to show the viewers.
Sure.
And if we can,
Yep, absolutely.
let's go over to the chapel.
Let's go to the chapel. I don't know if you noticed, but every once in a while you can hear the train go.
So, Monsignor, thank you for bringing me into the chapel, and I'm very excited not just to see the chapel, but we had talked about something very special.
These are the stained glass windows that we have, very few in the church, as I mentioned, but these are among the most beautiful stained glass windows I've ever seen. They're done by an artist named Joseph Nicholas. His daughter is one of the artists who did the stained glass windows in St. John's University's new St. Thomas More Church.
They're very vibrant. I mean,
They really are. Look at the
vibrant.
colors
how
and
old
the
are
faces. Well, they date from the early 50s.
Okay.
But they're comparison and contrast. Here, you see the birth of our Lord in the top panel, Jesus cradled in the arms of his mother, and in the bottom panel, the dead Jesus cradled in the arms of his mother as well. And then in this window up here, the first window, on the right-hand side on the top, you can see Eve, the mother of all the living, contrasted on the left-hand panel with our Blessed Mother Mary and the angel Gabriel in the Annunciation. And the angel Gabriel's greeting to Mary was Ave, hail, and the word for Eve in Latin is Eva, E-V-A, so they're the exact opposite. And one is the mother of the living in the creation account, and the other is the mother of the new world of the redeemed in the New Testament. But here is what this prized possession of St. Sebastian Parish is. This box and its content are 116 years old.
Wow.
This is a chalice that was given as a gift to Father Edward Gannon, the first pastor of St. Sebastian. And about a month and a half ago now, a woman who was a parish secretary in Vancouver, British Columbia, sent me an email asking whether or not this might belong to St. Sebastian. And the reason was there's an inscription here. It says, Mrs. Thomas J. Ryan to Reverend E. M. Gannon, November 12th, 1894.
That is incredible.
Okay? Father Gannon was the first pastor of St. Sebastian's, and he was named pastor in October of 1894. So Mrs. Ryan either was a relative of Father Gannon's or something, and she gave him this chalice to commemorate him becoming pastor of St. Sebastian Parish.
So do we know when it actually went missing?
Have no idea. Didn't even know it existed until 6 weeks ago.
So you got the email.
She sent the email, and you can see the detail on the chalice and everything. And for
It's in pretty good shape, I was
for
going to say.
116 years old, it's in excellent shape.
There's no scratches or anything?
No, it's a silver chalice, gold-plated. And what my plan is that we're going to have this cleaned up, and we're going to use it for the first time in the celebration of the Easter Vigil this year.
Excellent.
And to bring back a piece of history, this would have been the chalice that was used in the early days of St. Sebastian, before there was a church, before there was the old wooden church, before there was the school, when they were still saying Mass in one of the buildings here in the neighborhood. So 116-year-old chalice.
Now, where did she find it, the secretary?
Oh, well, that's a great part of the story, because a parishioner actually was a volunteer in a local thrift shop. And she came in one morning to volunteer, and she found this chalice and several others. And she said, they don't belong in a thrift shop. I need to take them to a church. And she brought them to her parish. And then that's the rest of the story.
Can you imagine that came from a thrift shop?
A thrift shop, that's right.
That's incredible.
So for a 116-year-old chalice, this is in excellent shape.
It held up pretty well.
It did, and even the inscription and everything. I'm going to have it restored, though, just to make sure it's cleaned up and so forth. And I'm looking forward to the first time that we're going to be able to use this once again in St. Sebastian.
I'm looking forward to it, too. Save me a seat. I'd
Absolutely,
like to be at that
Nick.
Mass.
Thank you so much for coming.
Monsignor, thank you so much. I really appreciate the
Great
tour. Great history, a lot to learn, a lot that we have learned. And I hope you guys enjoyed this tour as much as I did. A lot of interesting things, the artifacts, the fact that this came from a thrift shop and so many years later was found here. The fact that this used to be a movie theater and is now a house of worship, a house of God. It's really quite incredible. So join me next time on City of Churches, and if you'd like some more information on this episode or other episodes, you can log on to netny.net, and if you'd like to suggest a church that we should profile, log on as well and send us an email. Until then, I'm Nick Vavis for City of Churches. Hey guys, Nick Vavis here with City of Churches. On the next episode, you'll be joining me right here at St. Mark's in Sheepshead Bay. One of the unique things about this church is the pipe organ, actually 2 pipe organs, and if we're lucky, we'll get to hear a little sample. So join me next time right here on Nets.